the unsinkable ship. Back in 1898, when a relatively unknown writer named Morgan Robertson decided to pen a disaster novel, he called it Futility, and it told the story of a colossal British ocean liner that was supposed to be unsinkable. This fictional ship was the largest vessel ever constructed, packed with wealthy passengers, and marketed as the pinnacle of maritime engineering. In Robertson's novel, this massive ship strikes an iceberg on a freezing April night in the North Atlantic and sinks to the bottom of the ocean. Due to an inexcusable shortage of lifeboats, more than half the passengers die in the icy waters. The name of Robertson's fictional ship was the Titan. Remember that name, because what happened next will make your brain do backflips. Fast forward 14 years to 1912. The White Star Line launches their own engineering marvel, the RMS Titanic. At the time, it was indeed the largest ship ever built. The press and its builders proudly declared it practically unsinkable. On its maiden voyage from Southampton to New York, it carried some of the wealthiest people on the planet. On the frigid night of April 14th, it struck an iceberg in the North Atlantic and sank. Due to a shocking shortage of lifeboats that was technically legal but morally bankrupt, more than 1,500 of its 2,200 passengers and crew perished. Now here's where your brain starts to break. The parallels between Robertson's fictional Titan and the real Titanic aren't just similar. They're surgically precise, impossibly specific, and absolutely terrifying in their accuracy. Robertson's fictional Titan measured 800 feet long. The real Titanic was 882 feet long. Both ships featured the same triple-screw propeller design. Both had a carrying capacity of approximately 3,000 people. Both sank in April. Both had lifeboat counts that satisfied outdated regulations, but were catastrophically inadequate for the actual number of souls on board. Robertson's Titan had 24 lifeboats. The real Titanic had only 20. The fictional ship went down roughly 400 nautical miles from Newfoundland. The actual Titanic sank at an almost identical location. Even the circumstances were eerily similar. Both disasters occurred on cold April nights when the ship struck icebergs in the North Atlantic. When the Titanic disaster shocked the world, Robertson's forgotten novel was suddenly thrust into the spotlight. Critics and the public accused him of everything from being a psychic to being involved in some kind of conspiracy. How could someone write such a detailed, accurate prediction of a disaster that wouldn't happen for another 14 years? Robertson himself brushed off these accusations. He insisted he wasn't a psychic or a fortune teller. He was simply a former sailor with extensive knowledge of maritime trends who had done his homework. He pointed out that shipbuilding was trending toward massive, luxurious vessels. He knew the North Atlantic in April was prime iceberg territory. He also understood that maritime laws regarding lifeboats were dangerously outdated and inadequate. Robertson claimed he hadn't predicted the future. He had simply done the math, extrapolated current trends, and written what seemed like a logical progression of maritime technology and its potential disasters. But even with that rational explanation, the sheer specificity of the details remains absolutely chilling. The name similarity between Titan and Titanic, the exact cause of the disaster, the precise location where both ships went down, the catastrophic loss of life due to inadequate lifeboat provisions. It's a story so perfectly orchestrated that it feels like the universe was playing a cosmic practical joke written in extremely poor taste. This isn't just a case of someone making a lucky guess. This is a detailed blueprint for disaster that played out exactly as written more than a decade later. It's the kind of coincidence that makes rational people question whether time operates in ways we don't understand, whether some individuals can access information from future events, or whether the universe occasionally reveals its twisted sense of humor through impossible synchronicities. Robertson's story forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about the nature of prediction, coincidence, and fate itself. Was this simply an educated guess that happened to be remarkably accurate? Or was Robertson somehow tapping into knowledge of events that hadn't yet occurred? The mathematical probability of getting so many specific details correct by pure chance is so astronomically small that it challenges our fundamental understanding of how reality operates. What makes this coincidence even more unsettling is that it wasn't just the big picture that matched. It was the intricate details, the specific circumstances, and the tragic human cost that aligned so perfectly between fiction and reality. Robertson didn't just predict that a big ship would sink. He predicted exactly how it would sink, where it would sink, when it would sink, and why so many people would die in the process. This is the kind of coincidence that doesn't just make you think. It makes you wonder whether the future is somehow accessible to those who know how to look, whether patterns in reality repeat themselves with mathematical precision, or whether some events are so inevitable that they cast shadows backward through time. The Titanic disaster wasn't just a tragedy. It was the real-world manifestation of a fictional nightmare that someone had written down 14 years earlier with impossible accuracy. It's a coincidence that breaks your brain, because it suggests that sometimes fiction doesn't just imitate life. Sometimes fiction predicts life with terrifying precision. But this is just the beginning. What you've heard so far is merely the first taste of coincidences so impossible that they'll make you question everything you thought you knew about chance, probability, and the hidden patterns that might govern our reality. Our second reality-breaking coincidence involves two of America's most beloved presidents, and a pattern so precise it feels like history was written by a mathematician with a dark sense of humor. The lives and deaths of Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy are connected by coincidences so numerous and specific that they stretch the very definition of chance to its absolute breaking point. Let's start with the electoral timeline that will make your head spin. Abraham Lincoln was first elected to Congress in 1846. John F. Kennedy was first elected to Congress in 1946. That's exactly 100 years apart, down to the year. Lincoln was elected president in 1860. Kennedy was elected president in 1960. Once again, precisely 100 years later. This isn't just a rough approximation or close timing. This is mathematical precision that defies explanation. Both men were deeply committed to advancing civil rights during their respective eras. Both brought youthful energy and controversial new ideas to the White House. Both faced fierce opposition from establishment politicians who viewed their progressive policies as threats to the existing order. Both were seen as transformational leaders who challenged the status quo in ways that made powerful enemies. But the family connections get even stranger. Both presidents were succeeded by vice presidents named Johnson, who happened to be Southern Democrats. Andrew Johnson, who took over after Lincoln's assassination, was born in 1808. Lyndon B. Johnson, who assumed the presidency after Kennedy's death, was born in 1908. That's another perfect 100-year gap that seems mathematically impossible. The circumstances of their assassinations push these coincidences into territory that makes rational people question reality itself. Both presidents were shot in the head on a Friday while seated next to their wives. Lincoln was killed at Ford's Theatre. Kennedy was murdered while riding in a Lincoln automobile manufactured by the Ford Motor Company. The location details create a perfect mirror image that feels deliberately orchestrated by some cosmic force. Their assassins follow the same impossible pattern. John Wilkes Booth, who killed Lincoln, was born in 1838. Lee Harvey Oswald, who shot Kennedy, was born in 1939. Another century-long gap that maintains the mathematical precision. Both assassins were known by their full three names, which was relatively uncommon in their respective time periods. Both names contain exactly 15 letters when written out completely. The escape routes of these assassins create an almost poetic symmetry. Booth shot Lincoln in a theatre and fled to a warehouse, specifically a tobacco barn, where he was cornered and killed. Oswald shot Kennedy from a warehouse, the Texas School Book Depository, and fled to a movie theater where he was captured. It's a perfect reversal that reads like fiction, but happened in real life. Both assassins were killed before they could stand trial for their crimes. Booth was shot by federal soldiers who surrounded his hiding place. Oswald was gunned down by Jack Ruby while in police custody, with millions of Americans watching on live television. Neither man lived to explain their motives or reveal whether they were part of larger conspiracies. Even the minor details seem to follow this supernatural pattern. Lincoln had a secretary named Kennedy who reportedly warned him against going to Ford's Theater that fateful night. Kennedy had a secretary named Evelyn Lincoln who allegedly advised him not to make the trip to Dallas. Both men ignored these warnings and went to their deaths. The names themselves create another layer of impossible synchronicity. Lincoln's full name contains 7 letters. Kennedy's full name contains 7 letters. Both men were tall, lanky individuals with distinctive physical appearances that made them instantly recognizable. Both suffered from health issues that they kept hidden from the public during their political careers. These coincidences have fueled conspiracy theories and mystical interpretations for decades. Skeptics point out that with enough data points, patterns can be found anywhere. They argue that human brains are naturally wired to detect connections, even when none actually exist. They claim that focusing on similarities while ignoring differences creates false patterns that seem more significant than they really are. But the sheer volume and mathematical precision of the Lincoln-Kennedy parallels feel fundamentally different from random pattern recognition. We're not talking about vague similarities or approximate timing. We're talking about exact dates, perfect numerical gaps, and circumstances so specific that calculating the odds requires scientific notation with multiple zeros. This isn't just a case of 2 presidents being assassinated. This is a historical echo that repeats itself with mechanical precision across exactly 100 years. It's as if someone took Lincoln's life story, moved it forward a century, and replayed it with different actors but identical circumstances. The mathematical probability of all these coincidences occurring by pure chance is so astronomically small that it challenges our fundamental understanding of how events unfold in reality. We're forced to consider possibilities that make rational people uncomfortable. Are we witnessing evidence that history operates in cycles with predetermined patterns? Could there be hidden forces that orchestrate events across generations? Or does the universe occasionally reveal glimpses of a deeper order that governs human affairs in ways we can't comprehend? What makes the Lincoln-Kennedy coincidences even more unsettling is their emotional impact. These weren't just statistical anomalies or amusing numerical patterns. They were tragic events that shaped American history and caused immense suffering for families and the entire nation. The fact that such profound human tragedies would repeat themselves with mathematical precision adds a disturbing dimension to these coincidences. The Lincoln-Kennedy parallels don't just break your brain because they're statistically impossible. They break your brain because they suggest that sometimes history doesn't just rhyme, as Mark Twain once observed. Sometimes history repeats itself with such perfect accuracy that it feels like we're living inside some vast cosmic program that occasionally glitches and shows us the underlying code. These coincidences force us to confront questions that have no comfortable answers. If events can repeat themselves with such precision across exactly 100 years, what does that say about free itself? Are we witnessing glimp will, destiny, and the nature of timeses of a predetermined script that governs human events? Or are these simply the most remarkable statistical anomalies in recorded history? The Lincoln-Kennedy connection remains one of the most documented and verified examples of impossible coincidences in human history. It's a pattern so perfect and precise that it continues to fascinate researchers, historians, and anyone who encounters these mind-bending parallels for the first time. But wait, because what you're about to hear next will make the Lincoln-Kennedy parallels look like child's play. Our third mind-melting coincidence takes us to Italy in the year 1900, where a king would meet his perfect double in the most impossible circumstances imaginable. King Umberto I of Italy was dining at a small restaurant in the city of Monza on July 28, 1900. When the restaurant owner approached to take his order, the king nearly choked on his wine. Standing before him was a man who looked exactly like him. Not similar, not close, exactly identical, as if he were staring into a mirror. Fascinated and slightly unnerved, King Umberto struck up a conversation with his doppelganger. What happened next defies every law of probability known to mathematics. The restaurant owner's name was also Umberto. Both men had been born in the same city, Turin. Both shared the exact same birthday, March 14th, 1844. Both had married women named Margherita on the very same day. And here's where your brain starts to malfunction completely. The restaurant owner had opened his establishment on the precise date that Umberto was crowned King of Italy. The king was absolutely mesmerized by these impossible synchronicities. He felt an inexplicable connection to this stranger who shared not just his appearance, but his entire life pattern. During their conversation, the king learned that his double had served in the same military regiment, but had never received any honours for his service. Moved by this discovery, King Umberto promised to knight the man and invited him to attend an athletic competition the following day as his personal guest. The next morning, July 29th, King Umberto arrived at the sporting event and looked for his mysterious twin in the crowd. An aide approached with devastating news. The restaurant owner would not be attending. Earlier that morning, he had been shot and killed in a street altercation near the event venue. The king expressed his shock and profound sadness at learning of his double's violent death. As King Umberto was conveying his condolences and processing this tragic news, an anarchist named Gaetano Bresci emerged from the crowd. He raised his revolver and fired 4 shots directly into the king's chest. King Umberto collapsed and died within minutes, struck down by an assassin's bullet just hours after his identical twin had met the same violent fate. 2 men who shared the same name, the same face, the same birthday, the same birthplace, the same wife's name, the same wedding date, and the same key life events were both killed by gunshots on consecutive days in the same city. The mathematical probability of this coincidence is so small that it requires numbers with more zeros than most calculators can display. This isn't just a story about lookalikes or amusing similarities. This is a tale of 2 lives that were perfectly synchronized from birth to death, connected by threads so intricate and precise that they seem to have been woven by some supernatural force. The king and his double lived parallel existences that converged for one magical evening before ending in identical tragedy within 24 hours. What makes this coincidence even more haunting is the emotional weight of their brief encounter. King Umberto felt genuine affection for his double and wanted to honour him with knighthood. The restaurant owner seemed equally moved by meeting his royal twin. For one brief moment, these 2 identical souls recognized something profound in each other before fate claimed them both in the most brutal way imaginable. Our 4th reality-shattering coincidence involves a story so dark and prophetic that it makes horror novels look tame by comparison. In 1838, Edgar Allan Poe published his only full-length novel, a seafaring adventure called The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym. The book culminated in a gruesome scene where 4 shipwrecked sailors, starving and desperate on a life raft, make the horrific decision to resort to cannibalism to survive. They draw lots to determine who will be sacrificed, and a young cabin boy named Richard Parker draws the short straw. He is killed and eaten by his 3 surviving companions. It was fiction, a dark, twisted tale from the mind of America's master of macabre literature. Except 46 years later, art imitated life with precision so chilling that it would have impressed Poe himself. In 1884, an English yacht called the Mignonette set sail from Southampton, bound for Sydney, Australia. During the voyage, the ship encountered a massive storm and sank in the South Atlantic. 4 crew members managed to escape in a small lifeboat. Their names were Captain Tom Dudley, Edwin Stevens, Edmund Brooks, and a 17-year-old cabin boy named Richard Parker. Yes, you heard that correctly. Richard Parker. The exact same name as the fictional victim in Poe's novel, written nearly half a century earlier. Adrift for weeks with no food and virtually no fresh water, the 4 men grew increasingly desperate. They managed to catch the occasional turtle, but it wasn't nearly enough to sustain them. The young cabin boy, Richard Parker, became ill after drinking seawater in his desperation. Seeing that the boy was near death, Captain Dudley proposed the unthinkable. They should kill Richard Parker and consume his body to save themselves. After agonizing debate, they committed the act. Parker was killed, and the remaining 3 men fed on his corpse. They were rescued just days later by a passing ship, thousands of miles from any land. The subsequent legal case became a landmark in English law, establishing the precedent that necessity is not a legal defense for murder. But for students of literature and impossible coincidences, this case represents something far more disturbing. A real-life tragedy that perfectly mirrored the fictional horror story written 46 years earlier. A cabin boy named Richard Parker, sacrificed at sea by starving crewmates in identical circumstances. The odds of this specific name appearing in both the fictional and real versions of this exact scenario are beyond astronomical. Poe had no way of knowing that his dark imagination would become prophetic reality decades later. He couldn't have predicted that someone with the precise name of his fictional victim would find himself in identical circumstances, facing the same horrific fate. Yet somehow, his fictional nightmare became real with surgical accuracy that defies every rational explanation. This coincidence forces us to confront deeply unsettling questions about the relationship between imagination and reality. Can creative minds sometimes access information about future events? Do certain tragic patterns repeat themselves across time with mathematical precision? Or did Poe somehow tap into a darker truth about human nature and survival that made his fictional scenario inevitable? The Richard Parker coincidence doesn't just break your brain because of its statistical impossibility. It breaks your brain because it suggests that sometimes fiction doesn't just reflect reality. Sometimes fiction creates reality or predicts it with such accuracy that the boundary between imagination and future truth becomes terrifyingly thin. But we're not done yet. Our 5th mind-bending coincidence involves a man who seemed to be cosmically synchronized with one of the most famous celestial objects in our solar system. Mark Twain, America's beloved humorist and author, was born on November 30th, 1835, just 2 weeks after the appearance of Halley's Comet. This famous comet, visible from Earth only once every 75 to 76 years, was making one of its rare appearances when Samuel Clemens entered the world. Twain grew up knowing about this cosmic connection and felt a deep personal bond with the celestial visitor that had marked his birth. As he aged, he began making what seemed like outrageous predictions about his own death. In 1909, he was quoted as saying something that would prove to be prophetically accurate in the most impossible way. He declared that he had come into the world with Halley's Comet in 1835, and he expected to go out with it when it returned. He said it would be the greatest disappointment of his life if he didn't die when the comet made its next appearance. Twain claimed that the Almighty had created 2 unaccountable freaks, himself and the comet, and that they came in together and must go out together. The universe decided to grant his wish with timing so precise it seems impossible. Mark Twain died of a heart attack on April 21st, 1910. Halley's Comet had made its closest approach to Earth the day before, on April 20th. He literally came in with the comet and went out with it, exactly as he had predicted a year earlier. This isn't just a case of someone making a lucky guess about their death. This is a man who seemed to understand his cosmic connection to a celestial object and accurately predicted the timing of his own demise based on that connection. The mathematical odds of this prediction coming true with such precision are staggering. Twain's comet coincidence represents something beautiful and poetic in a list of otherwise dark and disturbing synchronicities. It's as if the universe wanted to give one of America's greatest writers a perfectly symmetrical and meaningful exit from the world stage. The man who spent his life finding humor and irony in the human condition got to experience the ultimate cosmic irony as his final act. What makes this coincidence even more remarkable is Twain's apparent awareness of the pattern before it completed itself. He didn't just experience a cosmic synchronicity, he predicted it, announced it publicly, and then lived to see it fulfilled with astronomical precision. It's the kind of coincidence that suggests some people are born with an intuitive understanding of their place in the cosmic order. These 5 coincidences represent just the beginning of our journey into the impossible. We've seen fictional disasters become real tragedies. Presidential lives mirror each other across centuries. Identical twins live parallel existences, and cosmic timing that defies explanation. But what's coming next will push the boundaries of believability even further. So far, might patterns we've explored make you think that coincidences are rare, isolated events that happen once in a lifetime. But what if I told you that some people seem to attract impossible synchronicities like magnets? What if certain families appear to be cursed or blessed with coincidences that repeat across generations? And what if some locations on Earth seem to be hotspots for reality-breaking events that challenge everything we understand about how the world operates? The 6th mind-breaking coincidence takes us into the realm of genetics and human behavior in ways that will fundamentally challenge everything you believe about free will and individual choice. In 1940, identical twin boys were born in Ohio and separated at just a few weeks old. They were adopted by different families who had no knowledge of each other's existence. Both adoptive families, by pure coincidence, decided to name their new son James. One became James Springer, the other James Lewis. For 39 years, these 2 men lived completely separate lives, unaware that an identical version of themselves existed somewhere in the world. When they were finally reunited in 1979, what they discovered defied every rational explanation for human behavior and personal choice. Both James twins were exactly 6 feet tall and weighed 180 pounds. During childhood, both had owned a dog named Toy. Both excelled at mathematics but struggled with spelling in school. Both enjoyed woodworking as a hobby and showed talent for mechanical drawing. These similarities might be explained by shared genetics. But what happened next pushes coincidence into supernatural territory. Both men had married women named Linda. Both had divorced their wives named Linda and subsequently married women named Betty. Both had sons whom they named James Allen, though one spelled the middle name differently. Both worked part-time as sheriff's deputies. Both were chain smokers who preferred Salem cigarettes. Both drove light blue Chevrolet automobiles of the same model and year. The medical parallels were equally impossible. Both suffered from tension headaches that began at the same age. Both were compulsive nail-biters. Both had gained and lost exactly 10 pounds at the same point in their adult lives. Both took vacations at the same small beach resort in Florida, sometimes during the same weeks, without ever encountering each other. These weren't just surface-level similarities or coincidental preferences. These were life choices, medical conditions, and behavioral patterns that seemed to be encoded in their DNA. The Jim twins became the subjects of intensive scientific study at the University of Minnesota, where researchers were investigating how genetics influence human behavior. Their case provided compelling evidence that our genes control far more of our lives than anyone had previously imagined. From career choices and hobbies to the names we give our children and the brands we prefer, the Jim twins suggested that free will might be more limited than we want to believe. What makes their story even more unsettling is the implication that our most personal decisions might not be personal at all. If identical genetics can lead to marrying women with the same names, choosing identical career paths, and developing the same medical problems, what does that say about human individuality and the choices we think we're making independently? Our seventh reality-breaking coincidence involves one of Hollywood's most respected actors and a book that seemed to possess supernatural intelligence about where it needed to be. In the early 1970s, Anthony Hopkins was cast in a film adaptation of George Pfeiffer's novel, The Girl from Petrovka. To prepare for his role, Hopkins wanted to read the source material, but he couldn't locate a copy anywhere in London's extensive bookstore network. After searching unsuccessfully for days, Hopkins was waiting for a train at Leicester Square Underground Station when he noticed a book lying abandoned on a bench. He picked it up and discovered it was a copy of The Girl from Petrovka, the exact book he'd been desperately trying to find. That alone would qualify as a remarkable stroke of luck, but the story becomes truly impossible when we learn what happened next. These 10 impossible coincidences force us to confront the most fundamental questions about reality itself. Are we witnessing evidence of hidden patterns that govern our universe? Could there be forces beyond our comprehension, orchestrating events with mathematical precision? Or are these simply the most remarkable statistical anomalies ever documented? The truth is, science cannot explain these synchronicities. Mathematics cannot calculate their probability. Logic cannot rationalize their existence. Yet here they are, documented and verified, challenging everything we thought we knew about chance, fate, and the nature of existence. Perhaps the most unsettling possibility is that these coincidences aren't rare exceptions to reality's rules, but glimpses of how reality actually operates beneath the surface. Maybe the universe is far stranger, more interconnected, and more mysteriously orchestrated than our limited human perspective allows us to understand. These stories don't just break your brain because they're impossible. They break your brain because they suggest that impossibility itself might be more possible than we ever dare to imagine.